Alright guys, welcome back to the channel and welcome back to our second part of our RPG series. So in today's episode we are going to be creating um, the player controller. So I saw the support that you guys showed on the first episode and I decided let's make the second episode not wait until the weekend, and let's release it before the weekend. Okay, so let's get into it. So the first thing we're going to do is set up our working space here. So as you can see, we still have what we had last episode, the little cube. So we're going to sacrifice that little cube and bye bye cube. Right, then we do not need the game view now because we're not doing anything, so we can just sacrifice it as well and just keep the scene view. But in the scene view we're going to need something, so we're going to right click 3D object. We need some place to work on, so add ourselves a plane. There we go, that is the plane right there. Okay, then let's go back to our assets folder. We're going to create a new folder and call it materials. Right, so these are our custom materials that we're going to be using. We're going to place them in this folder. Okay, so here we go. We're going to create a new material. So material here, and then we're going to call this floor. Right, we'll give it a base texture of, I need the checkered. There's a base texture, default checkered texture, which comes with Unity. So then we can apply that there. Right now we can see right now that it's too big, so let's increase the tiling 8 by 8. That looks better, and it's still a bit too bright, so we shall, I'm sorry about this, we shall make it a bit darker, something like that. That's good, that's good enough. Okay, so that's our working plane. We'll rename it on this side and call it floor. So if you remember what I said in the previous episode, the hierarchy is where our scene objects are, and the inspector is where we get to view the properties of those particular scene objects. So in this case we could see that we had the material, and then we can change the tiling from here, or we can just change it directly from the material there. So we could change it either in either place. Okay, the next thing, we're going to right click and create an empty game object that we're going to call player. Okay, so we're going to zero this out so that it's right in the center of the world. Perfect. Then inside that we're going to right click and then 3D object, we're going to put a capsule, so we can bring our player up. There we go. So you can see that our floor is not in the center, so let's center our floor out as well, 0 0 0, and then we can bring our player down to somewhere there. Perfect. So let's see how it's looking from the game view. Alright, so we can get this main camera up a bit forward a bit, somewhere there. We're not yet doing the camera controller, it's just a character controller for this episode. Okay, so once we're done there, let's right click here and create a new folder, and then we're going to call that player controls. So here is what we're going to do. We're going to use Unity's new input system, not the old one. So I'm going to show you how to set it up. So first things first, we actually need to get it installed into the project. So we're going to come here, package manager. Then you're going to go into Unity registry here under packages. So at the top here, you select Unity registry. Then you search for input. And then this will come up, the input system. So you install it. There will be an install button. For me, I've already done it. Then once you install it, I can't stress this enough, you should restart the engine. Once you install it, restart the engine. And then once you are back in the project, after you've restarted it, you have the new input system installed. So now let's set it up. So this is not really important. You can read documentation about it, but I also just learned how to set it up recently. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to right click, create, and then we're going to create a new input actions. Okay, a new input actions, and then you can call that player controls. I've already created it, so I'll not call it player controls, but you guys should call it player controls, because if you're going to be following exactly how I've done it, you can call it player controls. So just for the sake of showing you how to set it up, I shall call this character controls, but call it player controls because I've already set it up, because I always do tests of these things before creating an episode. Alright, once you have that set up, we're going to open it up. Then you should get this window here. In this window, you've got action maps and you've got actions. Okay, so first thing we're going to create is an action map, and we'll call this movement. Right, and then on this side now you have to delete and then add a new binding and call it WASD, like that. And then we're going to now change it to pass through and then to vector 2. I'm going to delete that binding, and we're going to add, and then you can see here it says add up, down, left, right composite, the second option there. We're going to select that, and then for the up binding we're going to come here and say W on the keyboard. On the down binding we're going to say S keyboard, so S keyboard. On the left we're going to say A keyboard, and on the right we're going to say D, then keyboard, like that. Then once you're done with that, you're going to close it and save it, and then you're going to come here where it says generate C# class. You're going to click that and then click apply, and then you get that C# class right there. So remember, you have named these player controls, not character controls like me, and you've named this also will be called player controls. So now let's create a new folder here, and then let's call these scripts. Then inside that folder, let's create another folder in here. Then we're going to call this locomotion. Alright, so now inside here we're going to create a new C# script, and then we're going to call it player locomotion. Right, that's your player locomotion script created. Wait for it to compile, and then we're going to come to the player here. So there are many ways of creating player locomotion scripts. You could use rigid bodies, which we won't. Instead, what we will use is the character controller. So you can just add component there and search character, and then you should find this character controller. So the character controller already has so many things set up for character movement, which we can use in our C# script to manipulate how the player is going to behave and how the player is going to move around. Alright, so once you've set up the character controller there, we're going to then drag the locomotion script onto the the inspector side of this same player, or alternatively, just remove component. You could also just drag it to the player on that side, or if you don't like either of those methods, you could add a component to player and say player locomotion. You should get that. Okay. All right. So now we can double click there or double click there, doesn't matter, but we can open the script up in Visual Studio. So once you have your script opened up in Visual Studio like that, then we can begin the coding part. So let's begin. The first things we will need the start, we will need the update, so I'm not going to remove them. We can just take these comments out. Then we're going to now start with the actual movement. So we'll say serialized field. Then we're going to say float the move speed. So we need move speed, which we are going to default to 5 for now. Then we're going to need another one, so we'll say again serialized field. So what a serialized field is that we can edit it in the editor. So if we say private, we won't be able to see it in the editor. If we say public, we will be, but we can still access it in so many other scripts, and I don't want us to be able to access these in other scripts just yet. We might change it in the future to public, but for now we'll go with serialized field. We'll say serialized field rotation. Rotation. My bad. Float rotation speed, which we'll not use in this episode just yet, and we'll set that to 3. We're just setting it up right now, but we'll not use it. And then the final one will say serialized field. We also make it a float, and we'll call this one gravity, which is going to be equal to, we'll say 10 for now, but we'll also not use it in this episode, maybe in the next one. Then we need one vector 2 input for our, if you remember, our input in the player controls. So we will say private vector 2, okay, and then we'll say this as the move input. Okay, that's done. Then we also need a reference to our player controls, to our character controller that we've set up there. So we're going to say, let's also make it serialized. So we'll say serialized field because we need to view it, and then we'll say character controller, then character controller, like that. Then we'll say we need the vector 3 here, so we'll say private vector 3 velocity. Okay, and then we need one more, which we're going to say we don't need to see this one, so we'll just say private the player controls. This is where I was saying you needed to name your controls player controls. All right, so we'll say player controls, okay, because I already created them, so those are the ones I'm using, and we shall call these player controls, like that. So these are the variables that we're going to use. So we've got the serialized field of float move speed, we've got float rotation speed, we've got the gravity, we've got the vector 2 of move input, then we've got the character controller that we're going to use for the movement, vector 3 velocity, and then we've got the controls that are going to handle all the movement. So from there, in the start, let us initialize some of these things right inside the start function. So let's initialize some of these things. We're going to say character controller, okay, is equal to get component character controller. Okay, so get component is mainly telling this script that wherever this script is seated, look for a component called character controller and assign assign it to the character controller variable that we have in this script. So then we're going to now come and say we need to initialize the player controls. So let's actually say, put a comment here and say init player controls, so that we initialize the player controls at that point. So we're going to now say player controls, okay, is equal to, now here is where it's different, because player controls is not a component on the player, but it's a generated class of its own. So we're going to say new, okay, player controls, like that. All right, then we're going to say player controls dot, right, say player controls dot, if I can find it, player controls dot movement. Remember, we set it up as movement, and then dot, okay, WASD. If you remember, we set it up as WASD. So we've got player controls dot movement, and from movement, what do we want to get? We want to get the WASD controls. Then we'll say dot performed. So we want to check the performed. Then we'll say plus equal, okay. Then we'll say let's use X, okay. Then we'll say move input, we need that. And then we'll say equals, all right, equals. So we've got player controls movement WSD performed plus equal X move input equals to, then we're going to say X dot, okay, X dot, we're going to read the value, right, we need to put the spiky brackets. What are we reading it as? We're reading it as a vector 2, and then we're going to open close brackets and semicolon, like that. And then we've got the next one, which is going to be, actually the next one, I'm looking at my notes here, next one is going to be the loop, but we're not yet doing that yet. So let's just explain what we've done here. So the first part, this part where you can see all these usings, these are the necessary statements that we need to include, and they contain namespaces that we can then use. If we remove, for instance, using Unity Engine, most of these things will stop working. So we need to add those necessary namespaces at the top, and we'll see a lot of namespaces as we go on using them. So we'll see some of them will even be custom namespaces that we will use in this very tutorial series. Then after that, we've got this part here where we declare our class. So our class in this case is player locomotion, and in that class, that class is inheriting from the class mono behavior. So because it's going to be a behavioral script, okay, so it inherits from the mono behavior class, right? Then we've got now our serializable variables. So these, if you are new to programming, are what we call variables. So we can create all sorts of variables, from integers, strings, dictionaries, lists, arrays, and in this case floats. So we created 3 serializable variables: float move speed, float rotation speed, and float gravity. Okay, then we've got the move input. So this is where the movement that we're going to be handling will be coming from, I should say. Then we've got the character controller, which is another variable which we're going to assign to the character controller this guy here. So we're going to be referencing this guy in this script here. And then let me just go back to Visual Studio here. We've got the vector3 velocity, which we're going to use to track the vertical velocity of the character. So we're going to be using this mainly for gravity. Right now I'm not going to do a lot of gravity, but that's what that is there for. And then we've got the player controls, which is now going to reference these player controls here. So in your case, these guys here. So in my case, they are in my test stuff and they're here, player controls. All right. Now that has been explained, let's carry on and then explain our start method here. So in the start method is called when just like it says, when the game starts. So what we are saying here is get our character controller variable, and then on the object where this script is seated, look for a component called character controller and assign it to our character controller variable. Then for the player controls, we're saying no, for our player controls, create a new instance of player controls, right? And then we're saying from those player controls, get the movement which we created, and then get the WASD action, and then what is performed, and then assign it like this. I don't even know how to explain this properly. I wrote down some notes here so that I make it easier to explain. So yeah, anyway, in short, we are trying to just make sure that we initialize these player controls at this point. So now let's create two other functions. We're going to say private void on enable, and then private void on disable. Those two. So as you can see, this says this function is called when the object becomes enabled and active. So once this is called at the start for the first time, and then once it's active, this is called. So what do we want to do here when the object, in this case our player, because that's where this locomotion is seated. So what we want to do when our player is enabled, what we want to do here is to say player controls dot enable. So once the player is active, the first thing we want to do is to enable the player controls. Okay, that's the first thing that we want to do. Then what else do we want to do? We don't want to do anything else right now. There we want to go to the disabled, and then want to do the same. For those of you who are quick, you've already caught up. We're going to say player controls dot what we want to do to them. We want to disable as soon as the player is disabled. So let me just put a comment here for you guys to follow when you're on your own and to be able to follow nicely. So here we're saying once object that contains this script is enabled and active, okay, enable player controls, full stop. Then we'll do the same. I'll just copy that, put that there, and then we'll say instead of enable is disabled and inactive. Then we'll say disable player controls. Simple as that, very simple to follow. So once the player is enabled and active, we enable player controls, and once the player is disabled, we disable the player controls. Okay, now we've got now to go into our update method, what we want to do in here, we want to do, because okay, here's how the update method works. The update method is called every frame, so most of our movement we want to handle it in here, in the very update method right here. Okay, but we want to do it in a better way, much cleaner way. So we're going to create 3 functions. So we are going to just call them here. So we'll say, for right now, let's alright, let's just create it, though we'll not use it right now. Let's say apply gravity, because remember I told you we're going to be doing some gravity. Then we're also going to say move layer, right? We're going to say move layer, and then we're going to say okay, for right now let's leave it like that, because we're not yet dealing with rotations. Otherwise we'll also put our rotations in here. We'll also put things like jumping and stuff right in here. So we'll try to make it better, where we do not have a very big update method, but we have different methods calling from different scripts and stuff like that. But for now, this is what we're going to go with. Then we're going to come here and create those 2 functions. So we're going to say private void. So it's void because it doesn't return anything. If it returns something, we would give it that return. So if it was returning either true or false, we would say private bool. Alright, so it would be a boolean function. But in this case, it doesn't return anything, so it's going to be a void function. If it was returning a string, we would say like that, right? So let's say private void, and then we're going to say on move. We want to do something when we move, so not on animator move. Be careful that that doesn't get selected. Open close brackets, and then we're gonna open close curly brackets, and then we're also going to do this or let's just create it. We'll use it in the next episode. It's going to be private well, this is for the look around and rotation. So private void on sorry, okay, private void on look. Okay, come on. Okay, there we go, like that. So now we're still waiting for these 2 functions. We are going to create them very soon. I just wanted to create these right now. So this would take input, we'll give it an argument, so input value, and then this would be value. So what you put in here are arguments that you can use in the function. So for both these functions, they are going to have an argument of input value called value. Okay, we'll leave them there for now, but then we'll go to create the move player function. So we'll say private void move layer. Okay, private void move layer. It doesn't need any arguments. We just create it, open and close curly brackets. Then we now need to think of how are we going to move the player. So we're going to move the player horizontally and vertically. Okay, so we're going to now say float. All right, because we need to move him between -1, I think, and 1. I think, yeah, -1 and 1. So I'm going to say float horizontal input, right? This is for moving the player horizontally. Is going to be move input. You remember we created the move input variable .x in this case, and then plus we're going to now say input input dot get axis. And what axis are we getting in this case? We're going to get horizontal. So this part is the same way that you do it in the old input system. So I just included it for people who don't want to use the new input system. You can use it like that. Then you say plot vertical, okay, is going to be equals to move input dot y, then plus input dot get axis. We're going to get the vertical vertical axis. So where are these two being collected from? So in the old input system, you go to file, edit, go to settings, then you go to where is input manager, input system package. Okay, we're using the new one. I need to find that. Yes. Manager, memory. All right, here in input manager under axis, you can see we've got the horizontal axis and we've got the vertical axis. So this is what we are accessing when we say in the C# script input.getAxis. So we are getting that particular axis, and I noticed that I've spelled this wrong. It won't work because it's supposed to be capital H if you remember. So it's supposed to be exactly the way it's spelled here and exactly the way it's spelled here if you are using that way of doing the controls. Then from there we're going to come down here and say move direction. Also, actually, let's create a vector 3. Let's make vector 3. So vector 3, which gives us the x, y, and z axis. Move direction. Okay. Then this will be equals to. So here we'll put another comment at the top and say use camera transform to rotate player. So we will do that in here, but for now we're not going to do any camera controller and rotation, so we'll leave it as that. Then we will say move direction. So we do not want to be able to move on the y-axis, so we don't want to be able to move up. So first of all, let's actually declare our vector 3 here. Vector 3 move direction. All right, we are not going to do anything with it for the camera stuff, but we now say move direction, right, dot y is equals to 0, because we do not want to be able to move on the y-axis. And then we will need to normalize it, so move direction dot normalize, so not the property but the actual function. Then we'll close that. So we're getting a red squiggly. Why are we getting a red squiggly? Use of an unassigned. Okay, all right, fine. Let's put the camera stuff. Let's say camera, okay, transform. Let's say I didn't actually include it, but let's put it there. Camera transform dot, okay, forward, all right, times, all right. So we are looking in the forward vertical input, okay, vertical input, which is this one here. I forgot to put the input. Why did I forget to put the input? I'm getting tired. So vertical input, then plus. So we are still doing a bit more here. So we're going to say plus right here, plus camera, okay, transform again, which we haven't created. We shall very soon. Dot right, okay, times horizontal input. All right. So now let's create this camera transform. So let's create that camera transform up here. I'm going to say right here, we say private transform. So we're not using, we're just getting the transform. We don't care about the game object itself, and we're going to call it camera transform. Okay. Then inside the start, we need also to initialize it. So let's initialize it right after the character controller. We'll say camera transform is equals to camera, okay, camera dot main, okay, dot, we're going to get the transform of the main camera. So what we're getting here is this here. What we're saying is at start, get the main camera and get its transform component, this guy over here. Right, now let's get back here and then let's look at our function, our move player function. So once we've done the normalizing, we can then go down here and say velocity, if you remember, but y, okay, we're trying to add the gravity, plus equal to gravity times, okay, time, time dot delta time. So what is time dot delta time? So what we're saying here is that our gravity in y, it should be equal to the gravity variable that will put the float times the time dot delta time. So time dot delta time says no matter what frames per second we're running this game at, always let it be the same. So it doesn't matter if your PC is slower or faster, the way the character should move should be the same. Alright, so time to data time helps us not to have on one place where it's the player seems faster on one computer and seems slower on the other computer. So we need that there. Then that's how we're going to apply the gravity. So we can actually put a comment here to apply. I didn't want to do this in this episode, but we can do it. Apply gravity to the vertical velocity. Okay, then we've got now to move the character. So now this is moving the character using the character controller, right? So we've done everything, but want now to be able to move the character using the character controller. So let's put a comment here and say move using CC. CC stands for, which stands for, so we'll use it a lot as CC, but we'll say it stands for character controller. Right. So now what we're going to say is character controller, right, dot move. Okay, so now we need to give it some arguments for it to use. So what arguments we've got? Move direction, of course, but not only move direction, we want to multiply the move direction times the move speed that we've set, so that we go at a certain speed, right? Then plus the velocity, okay? And then we're going to now get that, right? And then we're going to multiply that by time dot delta time. Okay, so we're going to need a curly brace here, right, like that. So character controller dot move, move direction times speed, movement speed, plus velocity multiplied by time dot delta time. That's how we want to move our character. So let's explain this method a bit. So first of all, it's going to handle the character movement. So first of all, the float horizontal input and the float vertical input will be used to combine an input from both player controls and also the keyboard. So if you're using player controls, it will work, and if you're not using player controls, you decided to not use it for whatever reason, it will still work. All right, it will work either ways. Then the move direction is calculated by, now we combine the forward and right vectors of the camera with the input values to determine which direction we are moving in. So we're going to look at the forward vector of the camera, combine that with the actual inputs. So are we moving vertical or horizontally, to decide which direction our character should move. And then we can apply the gravity, and then finally we can tell the character controller to move the character. Right? That's pretty simple. Pretty simple. Okay, so actually let's we're not going to do the apply gravity right now. Let's just comment it out. We'll do it later. Let's save this. All right, that script is saved, and then let's go back to Unity. So inside Unity, we're going to go to our player here. We can see that player controller here is in set, but we've got our movement speed set as a serializable field. We've got the rotation speed set and our gravity set to 10. So now when we hit play, our player flies away. We don't want our player to fly away. We do not want our player to fly away. Alright, so we've got an issue. Our player is flying away. Okay, let's go back and let's actually do the function to apply gravity. So let's say private void apply gravity. Let's make that function, and then right there you can comment that. So what are we going to do inside the apply gravity? So we're going to say if, right? So first of all, we want to apply gravity a bit more when the player is in the air. Okay? And then we want to reset our velocity when the player is on the ground, so that we just keep them on the ground. So let's actually comment that so that it's easier for you guys to revise with and change. We're going to say this part is for reset the vertical velocity. Remember that velocity.y? This is where we're resetting it when our player is on the ground. Okay, so if we're going to say character controller, all right, dot, okay, is grounded is already a Boolean property from character controller. So we're going to say if character controller is grounded, then what do we do if it's grounded? We're going to say velocity, okay, dot y, right, is equal to, we're not going to say 0 because we do not want it to be 0. We don't want it to be 0, so we'll say minus 0.5 f, or you can say minus 0.5 f, okay, whichever. Then else, if our player is not grounded, velocity dot y is going to be equal to it's going to be minus or equal to, not plus or equal to this time, gravity, right, times time dot delta time. So here's what this method is doing. We are trying to apply the gravity. So first of all, we're going to check if the player is grounded. So we'll use this part to check if the player is grounded, okay? And if the player is grounded, we're going to reset the vertical velocity to a smaller negative value, okay, to prevent sudden jumps or leaps when the player is on the ground. Then if the player is not grounded, that means the player is in the air, okay, we'll apply gravity so that we decrease the velocity on y over a certain amount of time. Okay, that's it. That's the simple explanation of that function. So let's test that out. Have we saved our script? Have we saved our script? We have. Okay, there, right, we have that. We can come here. Okay, and you can see now our player isn't flying away anymore. Our player is staying on the ground because the gravity is working, and if you use your arrow keys, it will work because we use that horizontal axis input. And if you use our WASD keys as well, it works because we set those up in the player controls, and we also use them in our script. So the next thing we'll do will be to make this camera follow us, so that we can be able to rotate it and follow our player should be able to move based on the rotation of the camera. Okay, so if you've reached this far and you have managed to do everything, of course we're getting this little error here which says on enable player controls isn't being found, but that's only because of, I think there's a bit of delay between start and enable. So if somebody knows a better way of doing it so that we completely eliminate this error, you can let me know, but I'll also look into it. But currently you can see that our player is moving around. Then we are going to do the camera following the player, and then we'll go from there. This has been a slightly longer one. I had to make it slightly longer because I need to explain everything thoroughly, because this is for beginners and want beginners to be able to follow along, despite the code that we're writing being a bit more advanced. But I try my best to explain everything, and if you've got questions again, or some things are not working for you, just leave them down in the comment section, and I'll try my best to answer each and every one of you guys, and then we can move together to create the games that you guys want to create. Alright, if you enjoyed this episode and it has been helpful to you, leave a like. It really helps the channel get out there, so that we grow a little community of our own here, of our own passionate game developers. And then also subscribe so that you don't miss out when I release any of the new content, any new videos on this series or in any other series. And like the video, it also helps the algorithm. And also, yeah, just interact with the video. It really helps the algorithm. All right, thank you very much, and I'll see you all in the next one.